Hello again, Colin Brown, licensing instructor and licensed real estate broker here in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. I am in the process of putting together a series of videos on required disclosures. And we've already looked at the Residential Property Owners and Association disclosure statement, the seller's disclosure. We've looked at the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure. We looked at the lead-based paint disclosure, and right now we're going to look at the working with real estate agents disclosure. And when is this required? What is this thing all about? And how does this affect us as agents and also buyers and sellers? This document used to be, up until about April of 2021, this document was a brochure, and it was rather confusing because the buyer's stuff was mixed with the seller's stuff, and people didn't know what to sign and where to sign. And agents really didn't know how to explain it either. Not that we're any better now, but at least for clarity's sake, the sellers have their own one-page document, the buyers have their own one-page document, and it's a little bit more clear in the way that it explains things. When is this document required? Well, and why? Let me explain the why first. Let's say someone's working with a seller, a listing agent. A seller's working with a listing agent. This listing agent is contracted by the seller. They are under contract to work on this seller's best behalf. What does that mean? In the state of North Carolina, anything that this listing agent can get that would be beneficial for the seller legally, then we are required to convey that information. Example, if a buyer calls and says, "Hey there, my wife and I are moving to the area. She's pregnant. I just got a new job. We've got $500,000 in cash, etc. My credit is great." They start spilling all this personal information. Well, we as licensed brokers, if I represent the seller, I'm required by law to convey that information to the sellers. So it puts that unknowing buyer at a serious disadvantage already, and they didn't even know it. So that's why the Real Estate Commission requires this document. It requires us at that point to stop the conversation and to explain to this customer, they're not a client, explain to this customer their options when working with a real estate agent. It's important to understand that this form is not a contract. Finally, they actually went out and said it right at the top. It's the very first thing. It is not a contract. The one we're looking at here is specifically for sellers. The buyer's side looks very, very similar. And in terms of time, we're not going to go deep into the buyer's side. The important takeaway is to understand that if you do not have a contract, an agency contract with a buyer's agent or a listing agent, then do not share personal confidential information with them, because they are required we are required to convey that information to our clients. Don't share personal information. And that time where the conversation shifts from facts about the property to personal and confidential information, that is what we call first substantial contact. And by law, we as brokers are supposed to stop the conversation, whether it's on the phone, whether it's in person. We're supposed to stop the conversation and say, "That's great. I am legally required by North Carolina license law to stop this conversation at this point and explain to you your options when working with us as real estate agents." Most agents don't stop the conversation because we don't have the wherewithal and the tact to insert this kind of information right smack in the middle of a conversation. We're too hard working on building rapport and trust with this person. But it is required, so do it. Sellers, we have options, okay? Sellers have options, buyers have options in how they can work with us. We're going to go into more depth when we look at the listing agreements and the buyer agency agreements in other videos, and we will also go into more depth talking about the idea of dual agency and designated dual agency, and buyers who prefer not to have any relationship with a real estate broker, and sellers who want to do things on their own for sale by owner. We'll talk about that in additional videos, so stay tuned for those. Just understand that this is not a contract. However, it is a required disclosure when we hit that line of first substantial contact, when the conversation shifts from facts about the property to personal and confidential information, we are required to stop the conversation and explain this document. Ideally, we get signatures here. And if we don't, we need to document that whoever it was, buyer or seller, refused to sign, document it, and move forward from there. Stay tuned for the additional videos on dual agency and designated dual agency. That's a big tripping point, and it's really confusing to people who don't do this on a regular basis. So stay tuned for that one.